Hi, my name is Leah Day, and welcome to this video for the free Motion Quilting Project. Today I'm ready to jump back on the spoonflower version of Express Your Love and learn a new design. This is called Bloody Sawblades, and I actually taught this design first in my class Free Motion Fillers Volume 1 for Craftsy. And this time around I'm going to stitch it in a very small scale, very tight, very dense in the background. We're actually working in this ray right here, the light blue ray underneath her arm. And I really like this design because it's a nice swirling kind of circular design. It's got a lot of thread play, a lot of thread buildup. It's got a really beautiful texture. But the really great thing is you can also expand it. So if, make it really big so you can stitch it on a bed quilt. So if you're interested in a bed quilt version of it, definitely check out the Craftsy class. We're going to be learning a very tight, very dense version of this design today. So let's get on the machine and see how this works in free motion. This is my quilting space, and all I'm going to do to get started is simply drop my needle down into the quilt, give that top thread a tug, and bring up my bobbin thread. And that really just takes some practice to get used to more than anything else. A lot of people struggle with just that one step in the beginning, and it might be because you're not rotating your needle all the way around, so keep that in mind. And I always drop my needle back down so that way I know exactly where it's going to be started. Okay, so this design starts with just a single curvy line, and then you're going to curve into a small circle. Now we're going to stitch saw blades, and saw blades is a previous design from the project, so you can always look up that tutorial. All I'm doing is just stitching basically an arch shape right into the center and then bouncing back and forth all the way around. And then come out and then swing around that circle and go all the way back to the center. Oh, sorry, not the center, back to the starting edge. Travel stitch along that edge and come around again. And swing out and around again. It's traveling against the edge of my quilting space. This line up here, just travel stitching 1 or 2 stitches, coming down and swinging around the entire shape, and then matching up right where that circle starts to spiral inside. And you can also build it up by just doing short little echoes across this side right here. And this is working quite a lot like Universe Spiral. If you want to look back at a design we've learned recently, that's going to be a design that's pretty similar. I'm going to swing around this way. So that shape is getting pretty big. And let's try stitching a slightly smaller one right here. I'm going to stitch a big saw blade right in the middle. But we're going to have to kind of jump, hop, skip, and jump to get around it to fill up the space completely with echoes, so it continues to look consistent with the rest of the space. And I have to say, of this design, my favorite thing about it is the saw blades. I love, number one, the name. It kind of just popped in my head, and I thought, well, that's just perfect. It's a memorable design. It needs a memorable name. But my favorite part of stitching it is always the saw blades, because that is such a funky little design to stitch right in that space. Now right here you can see I'm kind of going all over the place. All I'm doing is fitting that design, just some nice parallel lines, some nice echo lines into that space until it's completely filled. And now I'm bouncing back and forth between the saw blade and the edge of the quilting space, because this space is a little too narrow. I can't really fit much in that. So I'm just bouncing back and forth. And that looks pretty good. And at this point, I'm going to kind of bring up another one and have it come out and down that way. And don't worry if your circles aren't perfect. Because this is such a small scale, it's a lot easier to stitch circles on a smaller scale than it is on a larger scale. And so don't worry if they're not absolutely perfect. Your eye can correct for that, and it's kind of an interesting thing. Even if it's kind of more of an oval shape, once you fill it with the saw blades, it's not going to be noticeable. Now I'm just travel stitching and echoing, bouncing down and around, and back up. And you can see that little space, that little narrow space, was very nicely filled with just parallel lines. And in this situation right here, I'm just going to go on ahead and fill up this little pocket before I swing out and around and get on the other side of the shape. And all this movement, all these lines, all this stitching, everything that you see, it's really a process of familiarity with this particular design. I've stitched many variations that build off this element of swirling into, filling the circle, and then building it up on the outside. So when I see a situation like this, I know to go on ahead and fill that little space before swinging out and building it up through here. And that just simply comes with practice. So do understand when you see me just kind of be filling in an area and not really making sense, a lot of it has to do with I'm just simply wanting to fill that little weird space up completely and consistently with more echoes. And really the best way to get used to a design and all of the rules of it is stitch it in a square and stitch many of the elements completely. So stitch the swirl, stitch the saw blade, expand it, build it up. Don't worry about all those weird areas at first. You don't need to know how to deal with those immediately. You first need to memorize the basic rules of the design, and the basic rule is stitch that spiral, fill it with the saw blades, continue to echo and build around it. Once you have that base memorized, just like memorizing how to write your name, then you can take it and say, okay, well, I've got this little weird area. What do I do with that? Stitch some parallel lines into it. I've got this little, space in the corner. What do I do there? Stitch a little saw blade in there, build it up with more echoes. All those little questions really come from experience and practice. You cannot have it all figured out from the second that you look at a design or sketch something out. You have to actually get on your machine and play. And that means sometimes stitching something out, getting stuck, and having to look at your quilt for a little while and figure out what's the best way of getting out of that situation. There's no wrong answer here. That's ultimately what I'm trying to say, is there's no wrong way to fill your quilt with any of these designs. The best way to do it, though, is to get the most familiar with the elements of the design, with the rules, and then that's going to set you up to have the most confidence about stitching it. It's really just about, how we write. Honestly, this is writing, but with a sewing machine. And I'm sure when you were learning how to write, just like my little boy's learning how to write right now, it's one of those things you have to practice a lot, build some confidence for, and then as you feel more comfortable, start squishing things and getting them tighter and smaller and knowing how everything fits together. So I hope all that makes sense. My name is Leah Day, and this has been a video for the Free Motion Quilting Project. Find hundreds of videos stitching out beautiful free motion quilting designs at freemotionproject.com. Until next time, let's go quilt.